Well, good day, good afternoon, good time to you. Glad to see you all here. None more, a little bit more Rackspace content.
A little bit more.
I'm joined today with Corey Dockendorf. How are you?
How you guys doing? What's up, Drew? How are
I'm doing
you?
well. I'm Drew, and we're going to talk a little bit more cloud. We've been really on a kick of multi-cloud and digital transformation, and talking about all of the different solutions that customers are using to solve their problems in this world of public and private virtualization, of clouds sundry all over the place.
Right.
And one of those things we haven't really covered in much detail and depth on this show is Hyper-V.
Correct.
And you know things about Hyper-V.
I do know things. So as Drew said, I'm Corey. I am a racker for about 3 years. I'm on the Microsoft private cloud team where we handle all things Hyper-V. I'm one of the engineers. And yeah, we have lots of options these days. Like you have the Amazon and Google and Azure, which is another Microsoft product. But when it comes down to it, there's always a hardware option that is always provided.
Absolutely.
And one of these things that Rackspace supports fully is the Microsoft private cloud, which is the hardware option for Hyper-V.
Yeah.
Hyper-V has been around since quite some time, actually, since 2008. So it's just hasn't been leveraged by Microsoft until recently, because of the push for Azure. So we'll talk about a couple things there, but it's an exciting product and I'm looking forward to talking about it. So
yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about some of the other private cloud options, the virtualization tooling that you're still owning the hardware. You've got that control and customization and some of those opportunities that are less likely to be available on a public cloud offering.
Correct.
And we've talked about a lot of the Microsoft stuff. We've really kind of handed that Microsoft torch off to Kent Kingery and Jeff DeVerter as they've been doing their show every couple of weeks on Wednesdays. And they've been covering a lot more in depth and a lot more focused on the public side. So the Azure thing has been really growing, and Microsoft has put a lot of attention and time into that offering. But we've talked about the VMwares. We've talked about the OpenStacks and some of those tools, but I really want to be sure we flesh out the portfolio and talk about a lot of the other tools that are out there. And bare metal is going to continue to be a thing. We've had customers decide they no longer want to run their own data center, but who aren't necessarily at a point where they want to get rid of that owning of the hardware and an ability to get all the way down to the bare metal.
Correct.
So that's really where Hyper-V can play a huge role. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of those key wins that Hyper-V really excels in?
Right. So Hyper-V gives you almost the entire data center put into a single hypervisor. From there, you can spin up VMs, you get more manageability. A lot of other offerings don't give you that option, right? It doesn't say, hey, you can spin up a VM, but you can also configure the back end of it. Like it gives you that back door into things.
Right.
From a support standpoint, it's one of those, hey, I'll spin up a couple of VMs for you and a couple of VMs for you, and you can play in this dev environment or you can play in this live environment. And that flexibility is just fantastic. And then it gives you the ability also to scale, right? So like as your company grows, your hypervisor, you're only at the limitations of your hypervisor.
Right.
So the hypervisor has plenty of memory, plenty of CPU, procs, whatever you need. You can spin up and down VMs, which is one of the key elements of the cloud, to just provision and decommission at your leisure. And that's really what Hyper-V excels at.
There's often a tension between a developer and an operations person, and DevOps has gone a long way to talk about a culture where that no longer exists, or that exists with controls and leverage around it. But you often see an ops guy saying, you know what, I want to be able to see the entire thing. I want to have access to all of it so that I can make those fine grain adjustments. And then you see developers say, I don't really care about any of that. I just want quick and easy access to resources that I can use to verify, build, grow my thing I'm developing. And so that tension has really pushed customers more and more towards these types of solutions, because it's the kind of thing where you can have the best of both worlds, and you get to provide developers who really want that flexibility without alienating an ops guy. and without taking some of the tools that they need, because in a public cloud situation, there are times when it makes a lot of sense to use a public cloud, but you're going in a little bit more blind because you don't have visibility all the way down to the metal. And so you're relying on that vendor or that provider to give that to you, or your developers to build it in such a way that that's not needed any longer. And sometimes there are parts of the solution that really don't have that as an option. You need to have access all the way down. And so Hyper-V fits that Microsoft shop situation where your developers can move quickly with agility, with all of these tools, but also you've got that deep expertise. So it is a multi-cloud world. And we've just kind of mentioned a little bit of that need for some of that flexibility across other platforms.
Right.
How does Hyper-V play specifically with Azure? It seems like it'd be the most logical first
the most,
step.
The most logical step.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of one of the big products that they push is the Azure Stack, which Kent and Jeff cover regularly on their show. And this gives you flexibility because you can have the hardware piece and the cloud piece of Azure, the public cloud, and you're able to migrate up and down that stack and able to move seamlessly, basically, failing over from one piece to another. This gives really customers the ability to say, hey, they're running a database server on their VMs locally because they need those hardware resources. And maybe this doesn't scale specifically into the Azure piece or the cloud piece, or it's just a heavy application. So you can keep it down in your data center where you're able to manage the hardware, provide resources, and adjust around it, and then move up the stack from there and add more things and say, hey, my VMs for my webheads are going to go up here, but everything for my databases will go down here. And it just plays nice. It's a healthy ecosystem of a single product, and it works really well. Or we have customers all the time that want to utilize just the Hyper-V piece, and they say, hey, I really don't want to be in the cloud. We're not ready to be publicly out there. We would prefer to keep everything in-house. And that gives us the opportunity to provide support at the VM level and the hypervisor level, and be able to monitor and see and traffic and control VLANs and very simple things that we do every day, but at a smaller scale. So rather than having an entire data center full of 100 VMs or 100 servers, in this case, you just spin up 100 VMs on a single box. It's all right there. And you can just log into one place and do exactly what you need. And it's Windows, right? So everybody loves Windows. Well, maybe not the Linux guys, but everybody else loves Windows.
They tolerate it at times.
They tolerate it. But, and that's the other thing. We can spin up Linux VMs within Hyper-V as well. And now you have an entire library of software that you can utilize within a Hyper-V. That's huge within the cloud environment.
That's a broad solution set. And one of the other things we talk about in a hybrid configuration is having really specific dedicated resources that aren't virtualized, that can be paired with that virtualization opportunity, where you can still burst, but you're bursting into an environment where you have full control and visibility.
Correct.
And so the database conversation, I think, is one where that happens a lot. You'll talk about, we need tons and tons of storage and lots of ability to slice and dice that data very, very quickly. So we're going to buy custom gear that's going to do that job very specifically. And then the app layer is going to be in those VMs on hypervisors, where we can have flexibility. We can talk about failover. Maybe we have a couple of different hypes that we can move things around with, and that gives you the flexibility to work around updates and patches and maintenance things that traditionally either took you down or meant you had to have even more hardware in place to do that. And that becomes a cost conversation. So having flexibility on the capabilities technically really goes a long way towards flexibility from a cost perspective, from being able to work around the day-to-day requirements of managing and maintaining an environment.
Simple downtime is just as you said, like just in a situation for Hyper-V, you can build out a cluster with 2 hypervisors, and you're able to patch these things regularly seamlessly with no downtime, because you can fail everything over from one to another, patch, fail it back, patch the other ones, spread all the VMs across the entire cluster, and you're done.
Happy, finished.
No downtime involved, and everybody's updated.
Yeah. And so we've really been talking about some of the basic concepts and functionality around where Hyper-V fits and how it can integrate with other tools. But we offer Hyper-V support here at Rackspace. And so that goes beyond just what is this tool capable of. That adds additional value on top of that. Fanatical support in conjunction with Hyper-V becomes an even more valuable thing. So talk a little bit about where Rackspace adds additional value on top of this already valuable product.
So from the Rackspace perspective, we provide, we give all customers access to the hypervisors. We say, hey, self-provisioning, managed and unmanaged VMs. If you would like and you want to do unsupported devices, you can spin up as many VMs with whatever you want on it. It's bring your own ISO, bring your own software, and go from there and spin and go. And these are things that you can spin up, destroy, pull, save for later, turn off, and just leave it alone for a while. But then we also provide it supported, and that is really where Rackspace shines. Is that we have these VMs that we make sure follow a strict QC process, that we make sure are updated regularly, that if anything happens, you have an entire team dedicated to making sure that your gear is working properly. So rather than having the headache of, oh no, why did my VM suddenly fail over? You've already got a engineer level person working on it and engaged and bringing a team of support from network security to storage to DC ops that will manage it for you. And that's just one more level that you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, you mentioned an entire team of people who have various specialties that you are able to have access to. One of the big reasons people are leaving their own data centers is because you have to have a team that you find the right talent and then maintain that talent, keep them on board and there to do those tasks, networking and DC ops and all of that. That's an expensive proposition. That's really a spot where finding the talent is hard. Keeping the talent is even harder because you've got so many other people vying for that talent. And we've got people who do that work day in and day out on so many different customers' solutions that they're seeing a really broad cross section of what's possible, of what's problematic, and they're bringing that expertise to bear against those problems. So that's a huge value. But you also talked about the flexibility of saying, we want this VM to be a supported VM, and we want this one not to be.
Right.
And there's cost correlation with being supported versus not supported, I would imagine.
Of course.
And so you could say, the dev stuff, it's not going to be the end of the world if the beta goes down. We have different SLAs around our beta, or that's still in development, so we expect some problems. So let's not worry about it.
Exactly. You're going to expect in a dev environment, you're going to expect things to go down. You're going to expect to break things. That's kind of the sandbox that you need. But for mission critical applications, you're going to want someone there to be able to assist when these type of issues happen, because again, it's still software, it's still an OS, things will happen, and this is a very reliable way to make sure that Rackspace supports you as a customer and you're on a reliable platform.
Yeah, and there's deep expertise and relationship that we've established with Microsoft. I mean, they were not new at this, and we have great connection into the Microsoft community and ecosystem. So as things come up, we can certainly reach out to them. So it's not like people who do this on the side. This is deep expertise on these teams that are supporting.
One of the other things is that rapid provisioning. That's key here. Like we can spin a VM up in a matter of minutes versus get the hardware, put the box together. We finally got it online. Everything good. What do we need? You're like, hey, you know what? I don't want this one. I need to have another dev environment. Blow this one away. Spin one up. I think I've spun one up quickly. Not Linux, mind you, Windows 2008. Spin it up in 8 minutes.
That'll do.
Top to bottom.
That'll do. And that goes, anybody who's done colo work knows how long it takes to get a device in place. You don't necessarily have the freedom in all situations to say, we're going to use public cloud. And so this is one of those spots where you're really enabling very flexible, very quick response to situations. And there's a natural flow to the business cycle and to the development cycle. You have a new feature you're working on. That means that what you've been doing is a little bit older, and so you have fewer users potentially. So you shift resources into development. You're comfortable with what you've developed. You get through QC. You're happy. You do a big launch. Hey, this new feature's ready. all of my customers should be excited. You'll see more traction on the production side.
Yep.
So you shift resources to production, and then you look at, do I have enough to start work on the next feature, or am I going to have enough work to work through some of the bugs that all of this additional traffic is going to bring to light? If you do, great. If not, you've got time to, okay, let's deploy another hypervisor. Let's make sure we have the overhead and the capacity requirements that we're going to need, so that we can continue to be flexible, so that we can continue to provide the different organizations within, or the different silos and groups within your organization with the resources that they need. And your users are getting what they need because they've got the resources you've shifted from dev to prod, and they can just keep rolling. And you can also, hurdle those other things, those basic day-to-day management patches that you talk about.
Exactly. And then we keep going back to it. A lot of this goes back to cost, right? Is that as we said, you're going to have a team of specialists to start supporting this. No, but from a cost standpoint, you have Rackspace and we take care of that for you. And you don't have to hire an entire team to manage this. Licensing is always the famous Windows issue. Even with Red Hat is another thing, is that, I have to buy volume licensing, or how many devices am I spinning up that require licensing? In this, you don't have that. You buy the hypervisor license, which includes a data center license, and you can spin VMs up and down at your leisure without ever worrying about, hey, where did I put my AVMA key? Like, I need this real quick.
Not a problem.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Windows is like, sure, you can have all of these VMs there for you. Thank you very much. And that also goes for unsupported devices too. Like that, the licensing piece to just spin up devices at your leisure and not worry about that is just one to worry about on a day-to-day basis, which is just fantastic. We do host level backups. That if you have a VM that does go down and then you need to restore back from a previous time, as we've said in dev opportunities, hey, this build isn't working. Can you just put the old build back? Absolutely. Sure. Hyper-V says, sure, why not? We take backups of all that stuff. We'll bring it back up for you, and you have a device that's maybe a week old, but it's still good, it's stable, and it doesn't take any time to restore that.
Yeah, and as long as you're doing a consistent job on the backing up of the data side, you're just good to go. I mean, there's plenty of tooling out there that we can bring to bear against any component of that environment. So we've talked a lot about flexibility. We've talked about cost. Let's talk about the reliability side of it a little bit more.
Okay, so on the reliability side, we say you have an environment with a cluster. There you can use, for those familiar with SQL and clustering, you want to make sure that you have a highly available environment so that you don't have to worry about one device going down and then failing over and not being able to access your application. Hyper-V does just that. 2 hypervisors, 3 hypervisors, 4 hypervisors, as many as you need to keep your, compliance possible. We utilize data center replication as well. So for customers that have an incredibly highly reliable program that they need to run, an application that just needs to be up constantly in case of a DR, disaster recovery moment, right? Say we have something in one data center, we can move it to another data center and seamlessly be able to make that happen. Hyper-V provides that. We say, hey, you have a cluster here, we have a cluster here on the East Coast and the West Coast. Catastrophic event happens on the East Coast. By utilizing Hyper-V, it's happened. We've seen it.
Wasn't there a blizzard recently?
There was, as a matter of fact. Isn't it still cold?
It's always cold.
So you have an entire cluster that says goes down. With a switch of a button, you can take all of those devices which are replicating to your other data center, turn them on. They're constantly beaming data back and forth. Turn it on. Say, okay, this is where it lives now. You have time to work on your other hypervisors. You can go handle that, and your application never falls. That's a huge reliability bonus, really. And that's just another feature that there's no cost for that. That comes baked in. So we utilize so many different best practices, almost over 50 best practices from Windows, making sure that these hypervisors are strong, reliable, working day to day, just workhorses, making sure that your application is working. It's just, it's solid. It's a solid platform on a solid operating system that people are already familiar with. And that really is what it comes down to.
And one of the things that that seems to come up pretty often, but I feel like is a real differentiator between customers that have great success with Rackspace and customers that have more concerns and run into problems, is those customers that come to us and say, "Here's what I'm already doing. Here's what I want to be doing.
Yep.
Let's have this conversation." And keep a dialogue going where we're up to speed on requirements of those projects, and we're able to collaborate forward and say, well, there's this new feature that came out recently that we've vetted thoroughly and as solid as it can be, that's going to solve the problem you're talking about. Or there's this additional piece of hardware that we can introduce that will solve the problem that you're talking about struggling with on your 2.0 version of what you're working on. And having those conversations that are ongoing with your Rackspace support team about what your plan and strategy is. I think DR is what made me think about this, but that's one of those situations you think, I've got a cluster of hypervisors.
Yeah.
I can fail over if one of my hypervisors has a problem, but then, Hurricane Sandy shows up and takes down New York and your colo there. Well, we need to be able to have that geo redundancy and to be able to fail over. And we'd like to have a partner that can help us verify that all the networking gear is set up the way it needs to be, and the failover is smooth and everyone's communicating and replicating. Well, that's where we really thrive.
Right.
You can come to us and say, look, we've got an environment in one of your data centers, but one of our competitors just ran into this big problem where they lost all sorts of customers and face with the ecosystem and the environment. We need to be sure that doesn't happen to us. We can't allow that sort of a problem to hit us if we want to maintain our position in the market. And okay, great. Well, we've got these other data centers. Are you in another geo? Do we want to talk about maybe putting this in another data center in another continent? Like, how big do we need to get here? And that can be a really fruitful conversation. And you're basically shortchanging yourself if you have a relationship with Rackspace and you're not leveraging that consulting towards your future planning. Saying, look, we're doing this now. We want to do this, the other thing in the future. How do we get there? And if it's, we finally think that it's time to incorporate a little bit of public cloud. How do we do that best? Start that conversation. Let's look at how we make this AD piece work. Let's look at how we make these other components function well. Let's decide, does the whole thing make sense to replicate? Do we just want to work on maybe the app tier or or a piece of it?
And that's exactly it, is that you want reliability and uptime is the most important thing. That is what every application thrives on, and every developer, every engineer is going to say the same thing. How long can it be up? How can I guarantee that it's not going to go down? What is my downtime promise? If you set up the redundancy and you set up the DR plan, and with everything being natural and built into Hyper-V, it's not like you're adding pieces as you go along. You plan ahead and then turn them on as you go. That's a huge benefit to Hyper-V, to be able to say, hey, we're not ready yet, but replication's already there. When we're ready, we'll proceed because we just turn it on. That's it.
You just roll forward.
Yeah, just roll forward, roll it out. So,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, very cool. I think if you're not currently using Hyper-V, you're probably familiar with one of the other tools. So let's talk about some of the differentiation that Hyper-V has over some of the other market players, the other virtualization platforms out there.
So one of the big differentiators is obviously self-provisioning. More often than not, when customers go to a specific virtualization platform, it's, hey, we'll play with the hypervisor, but if you want to spin something up, you gotta just let us know, or put in a request or generate a ticket. We don't have that issue. We have self-provisioning devices that you can just turn on and off at your leisure. Okay, I want to build something. I think I'm going to build something today. I'm going to build something after hours. I'm going to build something after hours. That you really take the engagement out and say you have that control at that high level. And obviously the speed of building it up and down, and licensing costs. And that's, to me, that's what the cloud is, right? Like that's to be able to log into a portal or log into a website and say, hey, I want this now. This gives you that access. And that is definitely a huge differentiator than most virtualization platforms right now.
And I like the support all the way down to the VM side of things. I think a lot of times you look at an MSP, or you look at someone who's going to help you with your IT needs, and maybe it stops at, power and pipe. We're going to make sure that it's plugged in and that you're able to access the internet. And after that, don't care.
Yeah, that's it.
Or it's like, what, we're going to make sure that the hypervisor is fine. We're going to make sure that the host machine is running in a healthy way. And that's where we're going to end. Or a control plane. As long as the control plane works and functions and you can do what you need to do, you're in good shape. Or, we're going to make sure that all the servers you need deployed get deployed, but you're supporting them once they're up. But when you get all the way into, we'll support the VM, that means that a customer can really find where the best fit is for them in getting the support that they need, because a lot of customers come to the table with some degree of competence and a team that's already built out to a certain point. And it may be that, that guy's going to retire in a couple of years and we just need a transition plan or something along those lines. And it may be that, we've just been struggling to find the right guy to fill that gap. Let's see if we can get that through Rackspace.
Right. And the other thing is virtual appliances are the new thing, right? IDS software and everything. You've had this conversation numerous times on this show. But that's one of the things is people want to utilize their own application or something that is homebrewed that they built. You can do that in Hyper-V. We completely support virtual appliance compatibility. So you want to bring something in that you made or whatever, you can do that. And you have the ability, you can spin it up, tear it down, you can and we support you all the way up to the hypervisor level. And that's not a lot of cloud platforms and not a lot of virtualization platforms can promise that, because they're going to say, it's yours, we don't want to touch it. And we're saying, hey, if you bring it in, we'll make sure that it's up, we'll make sure it's running. You can configure it at your leisure, we'll back it up. And we'll give you that peace of mind for your application.
Well, I think that's at high level that we've kind of gone through. I think we've done a lot to show kind of the broad swaths of what Hyper-V is capable of, what Rackspace can deliver as far as support on top of that, and as far as a large portfolio. So if you can go back and look through a lot of what we've put up on YouTube, you'll see all sorts of specific functionality and specific offerings that when pieced together in the right way, when you get that SE conversation, you bring in someone who can really speak to how to match your priorities with our offerings. There's really a ton of opportunity and potential out there. So I think we're going to do some additional digging into Hyper-V in the future, but thanks for coming and giving us the high level.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope to come back and have more conversations. Windows 2016 is around the corner, so I'm hoping to be able to have that conversation.
We probably will, and I'll be sure to brew more coffee.
Yeah, bring more coffee.
Perfect. All right, well, we'll do this again next week. Thanks for coming.